6 years is a long time to be furniture. That is what I was aboard the INS Valdres. Furniture. The woman who came for the linens. I had a uniform. Gray and plain. A number on the breast pocket. A cart that squeaked on the left wheel no matter how many times I oiled it. In 6 years, 3 different head nannies learned to step around that cart the way you step around a support column. Not hostile, just absent. I was part of the ship's infrastructure, and infrastructure does not require acknowledgement. I was fine with it. I had come aboard for the work contract, and the contract paid well, and the work itself was honest. Laundry is honest. You put in dirty things and you take out clean ones, and the pile never lies to you about what it is. I had a daughter back on Calith Station, Mira, 14 years old, sharp as a cable splice, studying orbital mechanics on a scholarship she had earned herself. The contract kept her in that program. That was the arithmetic of my life, and it was enough. The screaming started on the 11th day before I came to the nursery annex. The heir, Prince Solon Veth, 14 months old, had developed a fever of some kind that the imperial physicians could not name. They ruled out infection. They ruled out the 6 most common Valdhari childhood illnesses. They adjusted the temperature in his room, adjusted the light spectrum, replaced his formula, replaced his sleep cushion, brought in a sound-dampening field from the medical suite. None of it worked. He screamed. He screamed through the first watch and the second and straight through third. He screamed until the sound became a kind of weather aboard the ship, something you dressed for before stepping into the corridor. The Empress had brought 4 nannies from the imperial household. All 4 had come to the Valdres with credentials that could have papered a wall. Nanny Orveth had managed the nurseries of 3 noble houses simultaneously. Nanny Kale held a certified early development qualification from the Valdhari Institute of Child Medicine. The other 2 I could not name. I had never needed to learn their names, and they had never needed to learn mine. By the 4th day of the screaming, Nanny Kale had gone to the Empress and asked to be relieved of duty. By the 7th, Nanny Orveth followed. The other 2 lasted until the 9th morning. The physicians cycled in and out. Officers walked the corridor outside with their shoulders pulled in, as if they could make themselves smaller against the sound. The Empress herself, I had seen her twice in 6 years, and both times she had looked through me the way you look through a viewport at the dark, was said to be in the nursery annex for 8 and 10 hours at a stretch, doing nothing useful, which meant doing what any parent does, being present for a child who cannot tell you what hurts. On the 11th day I went to collect the nursery linens at the usual hour. Nanny Orveth, she had been asked to stay on in a reduced capacity, because there was no one else, was standing outside the annex door. She looked at my cart, looked at me, and said that today was not a good day for the linen exchange. I said that the linens had not been exchanged in 2 days, and that damp linens in a sick room were a health concern. She said she appreciated that, but the timing was not right. I said I would be brief. She said the Empress had asked that the room not be disturbed. I went back to the laundry bay. The next morning I came again. Nanny Orveth was at the door again. Same exchange, nearly word for word, same result. On the 13th day I went to the ship's household coordinator, a Valdhari official named Saith who had, to his credit, always treated me as a person rather than a card attachment, and I explained that the nursery linens were now 3 days past exchange, and that I had been turned away twice. Saith looked pained. He told me he would look into it. 3 hours later he came to the laundry bay and said that the Empress had been informed, and had given approval for me to complete the exchange at the next scheduled hour. I thanked him. I went back to folding. The next morning I brought the cart to the annex door. Nanny Orveth was not there. The door was ajar. I could hear the heir crying, lower now, exhausted, the kind of crying that has used up its own energy and keeps going from habit. I knocked on the frame and pushed the cart through. The room was dim and close. The heir was in a low, padded sleep basin near the far wall, turned on his side, his small silver-pale fists opening and closing on the mesh of the basin edge. He had the Valdhari look, wider eyes than a human child, a faint luminescence at the temples, ears that came to a soft point. He was beautiful and miserable, making a sound like a failing pressure seal. I did not approach him. That was not my job. I went to the linen cupboard and began pulling the soiled sheets. I bundled them into the cart. I shook out a fresh set. And then, because this is what my hands do when they are busy and my mind is somewhere else, I began to fold. I do not know when I started humming. I did not decide to. It was an old Earth song, something my mother had hummed in the laundry room of our apartment block when I was small. I used to sit on the counter and watch her fold, and she hummed it the same way every time. Low and even, not quite a melody, more like the sound a room makes when it is at peace with itself. I had hummed it to Mira when she was an infant. I hummed it to myself on long shifts. I was 3/4 through folding the second fitted sheet when I noticed the room was quiet. I looked up. The Heir had stopped crying. He was on his side in the basin, watching me with those wide silver-pale eyes. Not asleep. I kept folding. I kept humming. What else was I going to do? Stop? He made a sound. Not crying. Something soft and questioning. The kind of sound a child makes when it is working out whether a thing is safe. I hummed the next bar. He made the sound again. I shook out the third sheet and started on the corners. He pulled himself to sitting. For a 14-month-old in the middle of a 13-day fever, that took visible effort. He grabbed the edge of the basin with both hands and pushed himself upright and looked at me. I set the sheet down. I crossed the room and crouched beside the basin so I was at his level. Close, but not reaching. I just hummed and let him look. He reached. His hand found the collar of my uniform jacket and gripped it, the way a child grips something when it has decided. I let him. I put one hand on the outside of his, gently, the way I used to when Mira grabbed my finger and refused to let go. He said a word. It was not a Valdhari word. At least, I did not think it was. It came out garbled, the way first words do, half-formed, the consonants soft and uncertain. But it was clearly a word, aimed clearly at me. It sounded like Mira. A little. The way a 14-month-old sounds when it is trying to say a name it has only heard in the shape of a sound. I said quietly, "I'm Sarah." He said it again. Same word. Firmer. I did not hear the Empress come in. I do not know how long she had been standing in the doorway. When I turned, she was there. Tall, pale silver, the kind of still that very powerful people have when they are trying not to frighten a moment away. Her eyes were on her son. The Heir looked at her. He looked back at me. He said the word a third time, and this time he pulled my collar, just slightly, as if he wanted to make sure I stayed. The Empress stood in the doorway for what felt like a very long time. Then she said, in standard, because she knew I had only passable Valdhari, "What is the song?" I told her, an old earth laundry song, my mother's. She nodded once, slowly. She looked at her son, who had let go of my collar now and was leaning against the basin edge with his eyes half shut, finally tipping toward sleep. She said, "He has not slept in 13 days. I said I knew. Everyone on the ship knew. She said, "What is your name?" I told her that too. She was quiet for a moment. She looked at her son. She looked at me. And then she said something I have thought about every day since, in the way you think about a thing that settled some old argument you had been having with yourself for years without knowing it. She said, "He knows yours." I finished making up the basin with the clean linen. I collected the cart. I left the room. In the corridor, with the ship humming around me and the sound of the Heir's slow, even breathing just audible through the door, I stood still for a moment with my hands on the cart handle. Then I went back to the laundry bay and started on the next pile. The work was honest. It always had been. I just hadn't known, until that morning, how far honest work could reach.